And this is the beginning of green anaconda breeding season for us at Nerd. So what's great about this, these are my F2 green anacondas.
What does F2 mean?
So when we talk about F1 and F2, so if I were to have wild caught animals and I was lucky enough or fortunate enough to breed my wild green anacondas, which is no easy feat, the first generation of the resulting babies will actually be called F1s. And if you raise up those, 4, 5, 6 years later and you breed those resulting offspring, if you mate them, are actually called F2. So they're second generation removed from the wild. And what's really nice about that, we have, these animals have never been in the wild. They don't have any parasites. They're very comfortable in captivity. This is all they know. So you end up having these wonderful animals that are so far removed from the idea of what green anacondas are when we watch movies and stuff. So these animals are very casual. You can go in there and pick them up. But the good thing right now, what we're looking at is this female right here, she has a large swelling. And so what's happening right now is she's swelling up with ovum. So ovum would be the maturing egg follicle of an unfertilized, immature egg. So what would happen if everything goes right and we're managing the temperatures, the light cycles, the humidity cycles, and making sure the condition of the animal is proper, and we're taking a nice male that's a great breeder. He's being introduced as female back and forth, so we keep doing these reintroductions over the next several months. And if everything goes right, we manage everything, her follicles will continue to grow. And at some point, her follicles will all come online where all the follicles are mature and they're sitting there. And now if she's been bred a bunch of times, she's gonna store sperm inside her. And what she'll do is she'll manage her temperatures, so she'll try to stay cool. And one thing that's really interesting about snakes, what they do, the follicles don't all mature at the same rate. So, getting this, G?
Who's G? Does G work for you?
Yeah, yes, G's greatly responsible for my green anacondas being happy right now. Okay. So, as the follicles are growing, they don't all grow at the same rate. So the animal really doesn't have a lot of control over that. So let's say she has 20 follicles in her. You may get like 5 follicles which become mature, and then they get as big as they're gonna get, and they sit there and wait. And then she's gonna take all of her energy and she's gonna put that into the remaining 16 follicles and get those so they all various times start maturing. Once they're mature, and now you have 20 follicles mature in a perfect world, they're gonna sit there, and her luteinizing hormones are gonna be elevated in her bloodstream. And what she does to trigger ovulation, she will then change her temperatures. So she'll stay kind of cooler to manage those follicles and allow all 20 follicles to mature and sit there, and right when everything's ready, she then can trigger ovulation by managing her temperatures. And what she'll do, she'll go and she'll expose herself to warmer temperatures. And at that point, the luteinizing hormones with the warmer temperatures makes her sensitive to ovulation. She'll actually ovulate, and the ovulation is the point of conception where the maturing ovum, the follicles, leave the ovaries and they go forward, and we get something called the lump, where all of them are pushed forward, so we physically see a large swelling where somebody actually came in here and maybe fed the animal. But in fact, what it is all these ovum moving towards the head of the snake, then doing this big U-turn. And as they leave the ovaries and come out of the ovaries, they meet sperm and they're fertilized. And then those follicles will now spread down into the oviducts. At that point, each one of those now fertilized eggs is sheathed by a blood vessel that brings nutrition and blood supply and oxygen, all the essential things for developing baby green anaconda. But they start out as an egg. It's not a calcified egg because there's no need. If we put out like a python that puts out a calcified egg, that calcified egg is for protection of the environment, because that has now left the animal, and now the animal's put it in the environment where it's taking in moisture, has to be protected. But within the anaconda, we have a soft-shelled egg or an enveloped growing egg, which ultimately grows an embryo. And if everything goes well, from Ovulation to birthing, dependent on temperatures, the condition of this female, and how many babies, could be anywhere from the lowest 128 days to about 148 days. So that means when she ovulates, 128 to 148 days later, she hopefully will have a live litter of baby green anacondas, which is no easy feat. Green anacondas are definitely not an easy species to breed, and breeding them reliably is certainly hard to do. One thing I'll note, green anacondas, even when fed well, when a female gestates and has her babies, after she has her babies, it robs her of so much of her fat resources, she'll need to take the next year off before you can even think about breeding them again. So generally, I breed my green anacondas every other year on my females, so they get the year off, and that way we can feed them well. And I just put them off to the side, we start feeding them, we don't even introduce them into breeding, and that way it works well. I have a nice group of green anacondas that we keep here, so we're always, every year we're at least having several litters. So if everything goes right this year, we could have 3 or 4 litters. We're watching movies on anacondas, we're thinking these sensational things, these giant animals. Indeed, green anacondas are not going to get nearly as big as any of these movies. It's all make-believe. These animals don't act that same way. Captive green anacondas can be very tractable pets. Definitely not for the beginner, so you have to be at an intermediate to an expert level to keep green anacondas. But a few things to point out. This animal is potentially a large-bodied animal, and in the wild, because they live in an aquatic environment, they can actually afford to get really big because the water is supporting all this mass. In captivity, I try not to make my green anacondas large or too large, so their comfortable sizes, males would be 6 to 9 foot, a female green anaconda anywhere from 9 to 14 foot is quite reasonable to attain. It does take a lot of dedication, making sure you're nailing your husbandry parameters and you have a good food source and you're doing a good job. But when I have a green anaconda and I start out with the baby, which is generally about 28 inches long, they are rather kind of slow growing for a time. And right when they get about 3.5, 4 foot and they can start eating larger meals, they suddenly will go through a growth spurt. Now, this is not the same kind of growth spurt you would appreciate with a reticulated python or a Burmese python. They don't just haul off and just start growing, you know, whereas you start gunning the food. They're going to put a fair bit of energy into still some girth. But they do grow at this point faster, but to get a green anaconda 10 foot, to get a Burmese python 10 foot, Burmese python is so much easier, just like a reticulated python would be so much easier. Green anaconda, it's a boa. I'm comparing pythons. Boas will grow slower, so you need to understand that. But I just want to make sure it's clear to people, green anacondas, you're not going to buy a female green anaconda and then in a few years it's going to be 12 foot. If you did get it to 12 foot in 3 years, you're on point, you're nailing it. So green anacondas, males are smaller, so that means that they're dimorphic. And we'll basically, when we're breeding these, my reproductive male, a lot of times G will say, hey Kev, the anacondas are breeding. And you'll see, if you look on our Instagram, evilmorphgod_official or England Reptile Instagram, if we have any videos up there, the male will wrap himself all around that green anaconda. Brazilian rainbow boas, which are essentially mini green anacondas, are also pretty much like largely a water boa. At least they act like a water boa. And Brazilian rainbow boas, and just rainbow boas in general, sometimes when they're breeding, you'll also see this male coiling around the female. And sometimes they'll stay copulated for actually days. So everything's really quiet right now, but earlier these guys were breeding. And you'll watch, you can tell when the male's really on point. He's going to start tickling the female, so they have their little spurs. And they're going to sit there and they're going to walk it all over the female. And what they're doing is they're positioning the vent of that female so the male can copulate. Like all snakes, they have hemipenes, which means that they have 2. And the male will insert one into the female. And here's an interesting point. When they're breeding, sometimes they'll breed, 12 hours, could be 24 hours, sometimes it can only be 4 hours. But what happens is when they're breeding, the trick is to stay locked. And the male has these little spines on his hemipene, and the spines, once he's inside the female, kind of locates him. And at that point, you never, ever, ever want to disturb your snakes. Disturbing snakes that are actually copulating is actually really stupid, because other than the fact that you're bothering them at a very precarious time in their life, if you cause the male to pull out of that female, as he's pulling out, the spines can actually perforate her cloaca, perforate her bowel, and you can cause an incredible infection, which will cost your animal its life. So if you perforate the cloaca and you allow any of that GI tract flora into the body cavity of that animal, that will cause a massive systemic infection. Within a few days, you actually have a dead snake. The snake will just suddenly die, and there's really no getting away from that. So you don't want to disturb animals when they're copulating. That's a really important point to note. And one more thing, they don't ejaculate. How about that?
What? They don't ejaculate?
No.
What do they do?
So what happens is the sperm moves along like a ridge or a furrow in the hemipene, and the sperm just kind of moves like almost like capillary action, and it moves up this furrow and out of his testes. So he's just constantly, there's this, you know, dilute flow of sperm moving from the male to the female, and then she stores that sperm inside her. And if everything goes right, just because snakes breed does not mean the female will ovulate. So just, it's really exciting to see snakes breed, but as a breeder, you need to manage the husbandry, you need the temperatures, all the things, and things have to be kind of nailed for green anacondas to get them to actually ovulate. And once they ovulate, you're really, you know, you're in pretty good shape, but you're not there yet, because now you actually have to get living babies, and things can always go wrong. There's a lot of energy extracted from this female when she's trying to raise these or develop these babies inside her. So birthing live animals such as anacondas or even boas can be tricky business, and to do it on a maybe a little bit larger volume can be tricky, because you know, you might do it once, you might do it twice, and you're successful, and like, oh, I'm gonna breed a lot of these. It often changes. But look how lovely these are. I mean, just wonderful. My guys. And here's my hand, and there's the anaconda.
They're not man-eaters?
No.
Oh.
They're wonderful. They're inquisitive. Yeah, they're a very sweet snake. I'm really keen on green anacondas. I certainly used to breed yellow anacondas. I'm not as geared for green yellow anacondas as I am green. I'll tell you one thing. I did hybridize a yellow anaconda and a green anaconda before, and I made the angriest anaconda in the world. I made a litter of angry anacondas. So if anybody, I would suggest don't do it, because for some reason those hybrids, although healthy, are unbelievably defensive, and they're just they're more than I would like to deal with. That's actually probably a snake that I found I could not socialize or tame. Green anacondas at Nerd, I love them.
Like and subscribe.
Oh yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe, comment, hit the notification thing, follow us at Nerd Reptiles on Twitter, England Reptile on Instagram, evilmorphgod_ on Instagram, follow us on our England Reptile Facebook, and of course our YouTube channel. Don't forget to join our Discord, and hopefully we can get some more people to actually watch our videos, but please help us spread the word. We're trying to really do some really responsible educational videos, and we are doing this for you guys, and the only thing we're really getting out of it is your wonderful comments, and so kind of help us along, because right now we're pretty secret.